phone to view that.
Alright, so welcome back to our reading room session today. Okay, so now we'll be going through the reading for Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Okay, so thank you all for joining our live today. And we'll continue from where we left off yesterday. Okay, thank you all for joining. So let's wait for a few more people to join before we start off today's session. Okay. Okay, so now we are at chapter 19. Okay, this is chapter. Oops. Okay, now we are at chapter 19. This is chapter. Okay, we stopped at chapter 19, so let's go through together. Okay, in which Passepartout takes too great interest in his master and what comes of it. Hong Kong is an island which came into the possession of the English by the Treaty of Nanking. After the War of 1842 and the colonizing genius of the English has created upon it an important city and an excellent port. The island is situated at the mouth of the Canton River. Okay, this is Cantonese, referring to Hong Kong. A dialect used in Hong Kong. I'm pretty sure I had this for comprehension. Oh really? You did this story for compre? Okay, that's the first time I heard someone actually seeing this passage before. So I'm pretty glad. Okay, let's go through the storyline together and you can clarify with me any vocabulary words or any words you find challenging. Okay? Hi question mark, exclamation mark, question mark. Okay. Yeah, wow, I didn't know. Is it for P6 or secondary school? Okay, because this comprehension passage will look a bit like challenging. P6? Oh, wow, I'm surprised to see that P6 have this type of compre. Okay, then how did you do for the compre exercise? Okay, was it a challenging comprehension? Because this story is pretty challenging. Okay, it's actually from chapter 19 of Around the World in 80 Days. Okay, just for your information, okay, let me continue with the story as this is a reading room, okay? So just let me know if you have any words you want to clarify so I can explain to you. I think they simplify it. Oh, I see. Okay. Wow, this is very interesting. Okay. So, and it's separated by about 60 miles from the Portuguese town of Macau. So, Macau is a place in Hong Kong, it's a city in Hong Kong, okay, it's a city. Okay, in the opposite coast, Hong Kong has beaten Macau in the struggle for the Chinese trade. and now the greater part of the transportation of Chinese goods find its depot at the former place. Docks, hospitals, wharves, a Gothic cathedral, a government house, macadamized streets give to Hong Kong the appearance of a town in Kent or Surrey transferred by some strange magic to the antipodes. Passepartout wandered, with his hands in his pockets, towards the Victoria Port, gazing as he went at the curious palanquins and the other modes of conveyance, and the groups of Chinese, Japanese, and Europeans who passed to and fro in by the streets. Hong Kong seems to him not unlike Bombay, Calcutta, and Singapore, since, like them, it betrayed everywhere the evidence of English supremacy. At the Victoria Port, he found a confused mass of ships of all nations, English, French, American, and Dutch, men of war and trading vessels, Japanese and Chinese junks, sampas, tankas, and flower boats, which formed many floating parterres. Hi Kira, thank you for joining the reading room, okay? Just let me know if you have any words you want to clarify. For now, we are reading a story. It was something about a terrible gale. A terrible gale? Interesting. Okay, hi Kira. Okay, later on we'll be going through the vocabulary practice in the afternoon, okay? So do remember to join our live later on. Okay, we'll be going through vocabulary in the afternoon. Okay, for now we are just reading this storybook together, and I will be going through some um, more difficult words with you. Okay, you can just let me know what's the meaning of any words that you find that you're unsure of. Okay. Passepartout noticed in the crowd a number of the natives who seemed very old and were dressed in yellow. On going to a barber's to get shaved, he learned that these ancient men were all at least 80 years old, at which age they are permitted to wear yellow, which is the imperial color. Passepartout, without exactly knowing why, thought this was very funny. On reaching the quay where they were to embark on the Carnatic, the Carnatic is a ship. He is a ship, and this is a place like where many boats are parked. He was not astonished to find Fix walking up and down. Fix is the detective, if we can recap. The detective seemed very much disturbed and disappointed. This is bad, muttered Passepartout, for the gentleman of the Reform Club. He accosted Fix with a merry smile, as if he had not perceived that a gentleman's chagrin. The detective had, indeed, good reasons to inveigh against the bad luck which pursued him. The warrant had not come. It was certainly on the way, but as certainly it could not now reach Hong Kong for several days, and this being the last English territory on Mr. Fogg's roads, the robber would escape. Unless he could manage to detain him. Well, Monsieur Fix, said Passepartout, have you decided to go with us so far as America? Yes, returned Fix, through his set teeth. He? Good, exclaimed Passepartout, laughing heartily. I knew you could not persuade yourself to separate from us. Come and engage your berth. They entered the steamer office and secured cabins for 4 persons. The clerk, as he gave them the tickets, informed them that the repairs on the Carnatic having been completed, the steamer would leave that very evening, and not the next morning as had been announced. That will suit my master all the better, said Passepartout. I will go and let him know. Fix now decided to make a bold move. He resolved to tell Passepartout all. It seemed to be the only possible means of keeping Phileas Fogg several days longer at Hong Kong. He accordingly invited his companion into a tavern, which caught his eyes on the quay. On entering, they found themselves in a larger room handsomely decorated, at the end of which was a large camp bed furnished with cushions. Several persons lay upon this bed in a deep sleep. At the small tables which were arranged about the room, some 30 customers were drinking English beer, porter, gin, and brandy. Okay, all these are types of alcohol, just in case you're confused. These are types of alcohol. Okay, I believe you are not at the age to be drinking these yet. Okay, so over here, smoking the wild long red clay pipes stuffed with little balls of opium mingled with the essence of rose. Okay, in the past, people used pipes to smoke. Okay, right now there's a lot of new new inventions like cigarettes or even electronic ones. So this is just a little information. In the past, they smoked through pipes. Okay. From time to time, one of the smokers, overcome with the narcotic, would slip under the table, whereupon the waiters, taking them by the head and feet, carried and laid them upon the bed. The bed already supported 20 of these stupefied sorts. Fix and Passepartout saw that they were in a smoking house haunted by those wretched, cadaverous, idiotic creatures, to whom the English merchants sell every year the miserable drug called opium, to the amount of 1,400,000 pounds, thousands devoted to one of most despicable vices which afflict humanity. The Chinese government has in vain attempted to deal with the evil by stringent laws. It passed gradually from the rich, to whom it was at first exclusively reserved, to the lower classes, and then its ravagers could not be arrested. Opium is smoked everywhere, at all times, by men and women. In the Celestial Empire, and once accustomed to it, the victims cannot dispense with it, except by suffering horrible bodily contortions and agonies. Okay, this means horrible, your body suffering from really terrible symptoms of the disease, okay, and will cause you to be very in pain or severely ill. Okay, a great smoker can smoke as many as 8 pipes a day, but he dies in 5 years. It was in one of these dens that Fix and Passepartout, in search of a friendly glass, found themselves. Passepartout had no money, but willingly accepted Fix's invitation in the hope of returning the obligation at some future time. They ordered 2 bottles of port, to which the Frenchman did ample justice. Okay, ample is just enough. Whilst Fix observed him with close attention, they chatted about the journey, and Passepartout was especially merry at the idea that Fix was going to continue it with them. When the bottles were empty, however, he rose to go and tell his master of the change in the time of the sailing of the Carnatic. Fix caught him by the arm and said, "Wait a moment." "What for, Mr. Fix?" "I want to have a serious talk with you." "A serious talk?" cried Passepartout, drinking up the little wine that was left in the bottom of his glass. "Well, we'll talk about it tomorrow. I haven't time now." "Stay, what I have to say concerns your master." Passepartout at this looked attentively at his companion. Fix's face seemed to have a singular expression. He resumed his seat. "What is it that you have to say?" Fix placed his hand upon Passepartout's arm, and, lowering his voice, said, "You have guessed who I am?" "Parbleu," said Passepartout, smiling. "Then I'm going to tell you everything." "Now that I know everything, my friend." "Ah, that's very good. But go on, go on. First, though, let me tell you that those gentlemen have put themselves to a useless expense." "Useless?" said Fix. "You speak confidently. It's clear that you don't know how large the sum is." "Of course I do," returned Passepartout. 20,000 pounds. 55,000, answered Fix, pressing his companion's hand. What? Cried the Frenchman. Has Monsieur Fogg dared 55,000 pounds? Well, that's all the more reason for not losing an instant, he continued, getting up hastily. Fix pushed Passepartout back in his chair and resumed. 55,000 pounds, and if I succeed, I get 2,000 pounds. If you help me, I'll let you have 500 of them. Help you? Cried Passepartout, whose eyes were standing wide open. Yes, help me keep Mr. Fogg here for 2 or 3 days. Why? What are you saying? Those gentlemen are not satisfied with following my master and suspecting his honor. But they must try to put obstacles in his way. I blush for them. What do you mean? I mean that it is a piece of shameful trickery. They might as well waylay Mr. Fogg and put his money in their pockets. That's just what we count on doing. It's a conspiracy then, cried Passepartout, who became more and more excited as the liquor mounted in his head, for he drank without perceiving it. A real conspiracy. And gentlemen too. Bah. Fix began to be puzzled. Members of the Reform Club, continued Passepartout, you must know, Monsieur Fix, that my master is an honest man, and that when he makes a wager, he tries to win it fairly. But who do you think I am? Asked Fix, looking at him intensely. Pablo, an agent of the members of the Reform Club, sent out here to interrupt my master's journey. But though I found you out some time ago, I've taken care to say nothing about it to Mr. Fogg. He knows nothing then? Nothing, replied Passepartout, again emptying his glass. The detective passed his hand across his forehead, hesitating before he spoke again. What should he do? Passepartout's mistake seemed severe, but it made his design more difficult. It was evident that the servant was not the master's accomplice, as Fix had been inclined to suspect. Well, said the detective to himself, as he is not an accomplice, he will help me. He had no time to lose. Fogg must be detained at Hong Kong, so he resolved to make a clean breast of it. Listen to me, said Fix abruptly. I am not, as you think, an agent of the members of the Reform Club. Bah, retorted Passepartout with an air of raillery. Passepartout is quite drunk already, drunk from alcohol, which is why he's replying this way. He's quite drunk. Okay. So his eyes already swirling. Okay. I am a police detective, sent out here by the London office. You? A detective? I will prove it. Here is my commission. Passepartout was speechless with an astonishment when Fix displayed the document, a genuineness of which could not be doubted. Mr. Fogg's wager, resumed Fix, is only a pretext of which you and the gentlemen of the Reform are dupes. He had a motive of securing your innocent complicity. But why? Listen. On the 28th of last September, a robbery of 50,000 pounds was committed at the Bank of England by a person whose description was fortunately secured. Here is his description. It answers exactly to that of Mr. Phileas Fogg. What nonsense, cried Passepartout, striking the table with his fist. My master is the most honourable of men. How can you tell? You know scarcely anything about him. It is barely. Okay, hi Kira, thank you for liking the live. I'm surprised that you are still listening in on the story as well. Okay, do let me know if you have anything. Is this literature? Oh, we are just doing a reading session and unpacking some of the common terms in the book. But yes, this book belongs to English literature. It is read under the studies of literature. Okay, hi Probis. Are you a secondary school student? Okay, we move on. You went into his service the day he came anyway. And he came away on a foolish pretext, without trunks and carrying a large amount in banknotes. And yet you are bold enough to assert that he is an honest man. Yes, yes, repeated the poor fellow, mechanically. Would you like to be arrested as his accomplice? Passepartout, overcome by what he had heard, held his head between his hands, and did not dare to look at the detective. Phileas Fogg, the saviour of Alda, that brave and generous man. A robber. And yet how many presumptions were there against him? Key presumptions, people who bad assume bad things. Hear about him. Okay, Passepartout essayed to reject the suspicions which forced themselves upon his mind. He did not wish to believe that his master was guilty. Okay, he did not want to believe that Mr. Fogg was the robber of the £50,000. Okay. Well, what do you want of me? Said he at last with an effort. See here, replied Fix. I have tracked Mr. Fogg to this place, but as yet I have failed to receive the warrant of arrest for which I sent to London. You must help me to keep him here in Hong Kong. I will share with you the £2,000 reward offered by the Bank of England. Never, replied Passepartout, who tried to rise, but fell back, exhausted in mind and body. Mr. Fix, he stammered, even should what you say be true, if my master is really the robber you are seeking for, which I deny, I have been in his service. I have seen his generosity and goodness, and I will never betray him, not for all the gold in the world. I came from a village where they don't eat that kind of bread. You refuse? I refuse. Consider that I have said nothing, said Fix, and let us drink. Yes, let us drink. Passepartout felt himself yielding more and more to the effects of liquor. Yielding means falling under. Falling under the effects of liquor, alcohol. Fix, saying that he must at all hazards be separated from his master, wished to entirely overcome him. Some pipes full of opium lay upon the table. Fix slipped one on into Passepartout's hand. He took it, put it between his lips, lit it, drew several puffs, and his head, becoming heavy under the influence of the narcotic, fell upon the table. At last, said Fix, seeing Passepartout unconscious, Mr. Fogg will not be informed of the convict's departure, and if he is, he will have to go without this cursed Frenchman. And after paying his bills, Fix left the tavern. Okay, chapter 20. We are already at chapter 20 of the book, okay? In which Fix comes face to face with Phileas Fogg. So while these events were passing at the opium house, Mr. Fogg, unconscious of the danger he was in losing the steamer, was quietly escorting Alda about the streets of the English quarter. Making the necessary purchases for the long voyage before them, it was all very well for an Englishman like him, Mr. Fogg, to make the tour of the world with a carpet bag. A lady could not be expected to travel comfortably under such conditions. He acquitted his task with characteristic serenity, and invariably replied to the remonstrances of his fair companion, who was refused by his patience and generosity. It is in the interest of my journey, a part of my program. The purchases made, they returned to the hotel, where they dined at a sumptuously served table note. After which Alda, shaking hands with her protector, after, after the English fashion, retired to her room for rest. Mr. Fogg absorbed himself throughout the evening in the perusal of the Times and Illustrated London News. Had he been capable of being astonished at anything, it would have been not to see his servant return at bedtime. But, knowing that the steamer was not to leave for Yokohama until the next morning, he did not disturb himself about the matter. When Passepartout did not appear for the next morning to answer his master's bell, Mr. Fogg, not betraying the last vexation, contented himself with taking his carpet bag, calling Alda, and sending for a palanquin. It was then 8 o'clock at 9:30. It being then high tide, the Carnatic would leave the harbour. He, the boat, the ship. He is a ship. They call a ship a steamer in the past. So it will be a bit hard to understand. He, because high tide belongs in the sea. He, Mr. Fogg and Alda got into the palanquin, their luggage being brought after on a wheelbarrow, and after half an hour later stepped on the quay where they were to embark. Mr. Fogg then learned that the Carnatic had sailed the evening before. He had expected to find not only the steamer but his domestic, and was forced to give up both. But no sign of disappointment appeared on his face, and he merely remarked to Alda, "It is an accident, madam, nothing more." At this moment, a man who had been observing him attentively approached. It was Fix, who, bowing, addressed Mr. Fogg. "Were you not, like me, sir, a passenger by the Rangoon, which arrived yesterday?" "I was, sir," replied Mr. Fogg coldly, "but I have not the honour." "Pardon me. I thought I should find your servant here." "Do you know where he is, sir?" asked Alda anxiously. "What?" responded Fix, feigning surprise. "Is he not with you?" "No," said Alda. "He has not made his appearance since yesterday. Could he have gone on board the Carnatic without us?" "Without you, madam?" asked the detective. "Excuse me, did you intend to sail in the Carnatic?" "Yes, sir." "So did I, madam, and I am excessively disappointed. The Carnatic, its repairs being completed, left Hong Kong 12 hours before the stated time, without any notice being given, and we must now wait a week for another steamer," so another boat, another ship. As he said a week, Fix felt his heart leap for joy. Fogg detained at Hong Kong for a week. There would be time for the warrant to arrive, and fortune at last favoured the representative of the law. His horror may be imagined when he heard Mr. Fogg say in his placid voice, "But there are other vessels besides the Carnatic, it seems to me, in the harbour of Hong Kong." And offering his arm to Alda, he directed his steps toward the docks in some of the craft about to start. Fix, stupefied, followed. It seemed as if he was attached to Mr. Fogg by an invisible thread. Chance, however, appeared really to have abandoned this man. It had hitherto served so well. For 3 hours Phileas Fogg wandered about the docks, with the determination, if necessary, to charter a vessel to carry him to Yokohama. But he could only find vessels which was loading or unloading, and which could not therefore set sail. Fix began to hope again. But Mr. Fogg, far from being discouraged, was continuing his search, resolved not to stop if he had to resort to Macau, when he was accosted by a sailor on one of the wharves. Okay? Moving on. "Is your honor looking for a boat? Have you a boat ready to sail?" "Yes, your honor." "A pilot boat, number 43, the best in the harbour." Does she go fast? Between 8 and 9 knots the hour. Will you look at her? Yes, your honor will be satisfied with her. Is it for a sea excursion? No, it's for a voyage. A voyage? Yes. Will you agree to take me to Yokohama? The sailor leaned on the railing, opened his eyes wide, and said, Is your honor joking? No, I have missed the Carnatic, and I must get to Yokohama by the 14th, at the latest, to take the boat for San Francisco. I am sorry, said the sailor, but it is impossible. Okay, I offer you £100 per day and an additional reward of £200 if I reach Yokohama in time. Are you in earnest? Very much so. The pilot walked away a little distance and gazed onto sea, evidently struggling between the anxiety to gain a large sum and the fear of venturing so far. Fix was in mortal suspense. Okay, mortal means mortal means that there is a limit. Okay, you know the word immortal and where it comes from. So for mortal, humans are all mortal. Okay, living things. Okay, moving on over here. Mr. Fogg turned to Alda and asked her, You would not be afraid, would you, madam? Not with you, Mr. Fogg, was her answer. The pilot now returned. Shuffling his head in his hands. Well, pilot, said Mr. Fogg. Well, your honor, replied he, I could not risk myself, my men, or my little boat of scarcely 20 tons on so long a voyage at this time of the year. Besides, we could not reach Yokohama in time, for it is 1,660 miles from Hong Kong. Only 1,600, said Mr. Fogg. It is the same thing. Fix breathed more freely. But, added the pilot, it might be arranged another way. Fix ceased to breathe at all. Stop breathing. Okay, how? Asked Mr. Fogg. By going to Nagasaki, at the extreme south of Japan, or even to Shanghai, which is only 800 miles from here. In going to Shanghai, we should not be forced to sail wide of the Chinese coast, which would be a great advantage, as the currents run northward and would aid us. Pilot, said Mr. Fogg, I must take the American steamer at Yokohama, and not at Shanghai or Nagasaki. Why not? Returned the pilot. The San Francisco steamer does not start from Yokohama. It puts in at the Yokohama and Nagasaki, but it starts from Shanghai. You sure of that? Perfectly. And when does the boat leave Shanghai? On the 11th at 7 in the morning. We have therefore 4 days before us. That is 96 hours. And in that time, if we have good luck and the southwest wind, and the sea was calm, we could make those 800 miles to Shanghai. And you could go in an hour as soon as provisions could be got aboard and the sails put up. It is a bargain. Are you the master of the boat? Yes, John Bunsby, master of the Tagadere. Would you like some earnest money? If it would not put your honor out. Here are £200 on the counter, added Phileas Fogg, turning to Fix. If you would like to take advantage. Thanks, sir. I was about to ask the favour. Very well. In half an hour we shall go on board. But poor Passepartout, urged Alda, who was much disturbed by the servant's disappearance. I shall do all I can to find him, replied Phileas Fogg, while Fix, in a feverish, nervous state, repaired to the pilot boat. The others directed their course to the police station at Hong Kong. I shall do all I can to find him. Phileas Fogg there gave Passepartout's description and left a sum of money to be spent in search for him. The same formalities having been gone through at the French consulate and the palanquin having stopped at the hotel for the luggage, which had been sent back there, they returned to the wharf. It was now 3 o'clock, and pilot boat number 43, with its crew on board and its provisions stored away, was ready for departure. The Tankadere was a neat little craft of 20 tons, as gracefully built as if she were a racing yacht. Her shining copper sheathing, her galvanized ironwork, her deck, white as ivory, betrayed the pride taken by John Bunsby in making her presentable. Her two masts leaned a trifle backward. She carried a brigantine, foresail storm jib and standing jib, and was well rigged for running before the wind, and she seemed capable of brisk speed, which indeed she had already proved by gaining several prizes in pilot boat races. The crew of the Tankadere was composed of John Bunsby, the master, and four hardy mariners who were familiar with the Chinese seas. John Bunsby himself, a man of 45 or thereabouts, vigorous, sunburnt, with a sprightly expression of the eye, an energetic and self-reliant countenance, would have inspired confidence in the most timid. Phileas Fogg and Alda went on board, where they found Fix already installed. Below deck was a square cabin, of which the walls bulged out in the form of cots, above a circular divan. In the center was a table provided with a swinging lamp. The accommodation was confined but neat. I am sorry to have nothing better to offer you, said Mr. Fogg to Fix, who bowed without responding. The detective had a feeling akin to humiliation in profiting by the kindness of Mr. Fogg. It's certain, thought he, though rascal as he is a polite one. The sails and the English flag were hoisted at 10 minutes past 3. Mr. Fogg and Alda, who were seated on deck, cast a last glance at the key, in hope of espying the Passepartout. Fix was not without his fears lest chance should direct the steps of the unfortunate servant, whom he had so badly treated, in this direction, in which case an explanation of the reverse of satisfactory to the detective must have ensued. But the Frenchman did not appear, and without doubt was still lying under the stupefying influence of the opium. John Bunsby, master, at length gave the order to start, and the Tankadere, taking the wind under her brigantine, for sail, and standing jib, bounded briskly forward over the waves. Okay, chapter 21. Okay, now we are at chapter 21. Let's take a short break over here and do remember to ask me any questions and follow us for our daily free English live lessons. Okay? Okay. If there is no further questions, shall we move on? Okay, in that case, we should move on to the next part. Okay. This voyage of 800 miles was a perilous venture on a craft of 20 tons. And at the season of the year, the Chinese seas are usually boisterous, subject to terrible gales of wind, and especially during the equinoxes, and it was now early November. It would clearly have to be in the master's advantage to carry his passengers to Yokohama since he was paid a certain sum per day. And he would have been rash to attempt such a voyage, but it was imprudent to even attempt to reach Shanghai. But John Bunsby believed in the Tankadere, which rode the waves like a seagull, and perhaps he was not wrong. Boisterous? Hi, RRRR. What do you mean by boisterous? Boisterous. The Chinese seas are usually boisterous. It means that the waves are very strong. Okay, strong waves. Okay, boisterous can also be used to describe human beings as well. Okay, like this boy is boisterous. Okay, full of energy. Late in the day, they passed through the capricious channels of Hong Kong, and the Tankadere, impelled by favorable winds, conducted herself admirably. I do not need pilot, said Phileas Fogg. When they when they got into the open sea, I advise you use all possible speed. Trust me, Your Honor, we are carrying all the sail the wind will let us. The poles will add nothing, and are only used when we are going into port. It is your trade, not mine, pilot, and I confide in you. Phileas Fogg, with bodies erect and legs wide apart, standing in like a sailor, gazed without staggering at the swelling waters. The young woman, who was seated aft, was profoundly affected as she looked out upon the ocean, darkening now with the twilight, on which she had ventured in so frail a vessel. Above her head rustled the white sails, which seemed like great white wings. The boat, carried forward by the wind, seemed to be flying in the air. Night came. The moon was entering her first quarter, and her insufficient light would soon die out in the mist on the horizon. Clouds were rising from the east and already overcast a part of the heavens. The pilot had hung out his lights, which was very necessary. In these seas crowded with vessels bound landward. For collisions are not uncommon occurrences, and at the speed she was going, the least shock would shatter the gallant little craft. Fix, seated in the bow, gave himself up to meditation. He kept apart from his fellow travellers, knowing Mr. Fogg's taciturn taste. Besides, he did not quite like to talk to the man whose favours he had accepted. He was thinking, too, of the future. It seemed certain that Fogg would not stop at Yokohama, but would at once take the boat for San Francisco, and the vast extent of America would ensure him impunity and safety. Fogg's plans appeared to him the simplest in the world. Instead of sailing directly from England to the United States, like a common villain, he had traversed three quarters of the globe, so as to gain the American continent more surely, and there, after throwing the police off his track, he would quietly enjoy himself with the fortune stolen from the bank. But once in the United States, what should he, Fix, do? Should he abandon this man? No, 100 times no. Until he had secured his extradition, he would not lose sight of him for an hour. It was his duty, and he would fulfill it to the end. At all events, there was one thing to be thankful for. Passepartout was not with his master, and it was above all important, after the confidences Fix had imparted to him, that the servant should never have speech with his master. Phileas Fogg was also thinking of Passepartout, who had so strangely disappeared. Looking at the matter from every point of view, it did not seem to him impossible that by some mistake the man might have embarked on the Carnatic at the last moment, and this was also Oda's opinion. Who regretted very much the loss of the worthy fellow to whom she owed so much. They might find him at Yokohama if the Carnatic was carrying him thither. It would be easy to ascertain if he had been on board. Okay, hi Reno. Is that how to pronounce Renoki? Reno, Renokel. Okay, thank you for following us for today. Okay, through this live, I hope you have learned a lot of new things and more information. Okay. Okay. Okay, if you have anything you want to clarify, do feel free to let me know. Okay. He might have been prudent to take in a reef. The pilot, after carefully examining the heavens, left the craft remain rigged as before. The Tankadere bore sail admirably, as she drew a great deal of water, and everything was prepared for high speed in case of a gale. Mr. Fogg and Alda descended into the cabin at midnight, having been already preceded by Fix, who had lain down on one of the cots. The pilot and crew remained on deck all night. At sunrise the next day, which was the 8th of November, the boat had made more than 100 miles. The log indicated a mean speed of between 8 and 9 miles. The Tankadere still carried all sail and was accomplishing her greatest capacity of speed. If the wind held as it was, the chances would be in her favor. During the day, she kept along the coast where the currents were favorable. The coast, irregular in profile and visible sometimes across the clearings, was at most 5 miles distant. The sea was less boisterous since the wind came off land, a fortunate circumstance for the boat, which would suffer, owing to its small tonnage, by a heavy surge on the sea. The breeze subsided a little towards noon and set in from the southwest. The pilot put up his post, but took them down again within 2 hours, as the wind freshened up anew. Mr. Fogg and Alda, happily unaffected by the roughness of the sea, ate with a good appetite. Fix being invited to share their repast, which he accepted with a secret chagrin. To travel at this man's expense and live upon his provisions was not palatable to him. Still, he was obliged to eat, and so he ate. When the meal was over, he took Mr. Fogg apart and said, "Sir," this "sir" scorched his lips, and he had to control himself to avoid collaring this gentleman. "Sir, you have been very kind to give me passage on this boat. But though my means do not admit my expending them as freely as you, I must ask to pay my share." "Let us not speak of that," replied Mr. Fogg. "But if I insist—" "No, sir," repeated Mr. Fogg, in a tone which did not admit of a reply. "This enters into my general expenses." Fix, as he bowed, had a stifled feeling, and going forward, where he ensconced himself, did not open his mouth for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, they were progressing famously, and John Bunsby was in high hope. He several times assured Mr. Fogg that they would reach Shanghai in time, to which that gentleman responded that he counted upon it. The crew set to work in good earnest, inspired by the reward to be gained. There was not a sheet which was not tightened, not a sail which was not vigorously hoisted. Not a lurch could be charged to the men at the helm. They worked as desperately as if they were contesting in a royal yacht regatta. By evening, the log showed that 220 miles had been accomplished from Hong Kong, and Mr. Fogg might hope that he would be able to reach Yokohama without recording any delay in his journal, in which case the many misadventures which had overtaken him since he left London would not seriously affect his journey. The Tangadere entered the Straits of Fokien, which separate the island of Formosa from the Chinese coast, in the small hours of the night, and crossed the Tropic of Cancer. The sea was very rough in the straits, full of eddies formed by the counter currents, and the chopping waves broke her course, whilst it became very difficult to stand on deck. At daybreak the wind began to blow hard again, and the heavens seemed to predict a gale. The barometer announced a speedy change, the mercury rising and falling capriciously. The sea also in the southeast, raised long surges, which indicated a tempest. The sun had set the evening before in a red mist, in the midst of the phosphorescent scintillations of the oceans. John Bunsby long examined the threatening aspect of the heavens, muttering indistinctly between his teeth. At last he said in a low voice to Mr. Fogg, "Shall I speak out to your honour?" "Of course." "Well, we are going to have a squall." "Is the wind north or south?" asked Mr. Fogg quietly. "South, look, a typhoon is coming up." "Glad it's a typhoon from the south, for it will carry us forward." "Oh, if you take it that way," said John Bunsby, "I've nothing more to say." John Bunsby's suspicions were confirmed. At a less advanced season of the year of the typhoon, according to a famous meteorologist, would have passed away like a luminous cascade of the electrical flame. But in the winter equinox, it was to be feared that it would burst upon them with great violence. He reefed all the sail. The pole masts were dispensed with. All hands went forward to the bows. A single triangular sail of strong canvas was hoisted as a storm jib, so as to hold the wind from behind. Then they waited. John Bunsby had requested his passengers to go below, but this imprisonment in so narrow a space, with little air and the boat bouncing in the gale, was far from pleasant. Neither Mr. Fogg, Fix, nor Alda consented to leave the deck. The storm of rain and wind descended upon them towards 8 o'clock. With but its bits of sail, the Tankadere was lifted like a feather by a wind, an idea of whose violence can scarcely be given. To compare her speed to 4 times that of a locomotive going on full steam would be below the truth. The boat scudded thus northward during the whole day, borne on by a monstrous waves, preserving always, fortunately, a speed equal to theirs. 20 times she seemed most to be submerged by these mountains of water which rose behind her, but the adroit management of the pilot saved her. The passengers were often bathed in spray, but they submitted to it philosophically. Fix cursed it, no doubt, but Alda, with her eyes fastened upon her protector, whose coolness amazed her, showed herself worthy of him, and bravely weathered the storm. As for Phileas Fogg, it seemed just as if the typhoon were part of his program. So this guy is really, really cool about everything. Okay, moving on. Up to his time, the Tankadere had always held her course to the north. But towards evening, the wind, veering 3 quarters, bore down from the northwest. The boat, now lying in the trough of waves, shook and rolled terribly. The sea struck her with fearful violence. At night of the tempest increased the violence. John Bunsby saw the approach of darkness and the rising of the storm with dark misgivings. He thought a while, and then asked his crew if it was not time to slacken speed. After a consultation, he approached of the darkness and the rising of the storm with dark misgivings. He thought a while, and then asked his crew if it was not time to slacken speed. After a consultation, he approached Mr. Fogg and said, "I think, Your Honour, that we should do well to wait for one of the ports on the coast. I think so too. Ah, said the pilot, but which one? I know of one but one, returned Mr. Fogg tranquilly. And that is Shanghai. The pilot, at first, did not seem to comprehend. He could scarcely realize so much determination and tenacity. Then he cried, "Well, yes, your honor is right, to Shanghai." So the Tankadere kept steadily on her northward track. The night was really terrible. It would be a miracle if the craft did not founder. Twice it could have been all over her if the crew had been constantly on the watch. Alda was exhausted, but did not utter a complaint. More than once, Mr. Fogg rushed to protect her from the violence of the waves. Okay, you can see that Mr. Fogg, Mr. Fogg protected her. Okay, they reappeared. The tempest still raged with undiminished fury, but the wind now returned to the southeast. Okay, so tempest still raged and fury means it's very intense. Okay, over here. Okay, you can see it's very very intense. Tanqueray again bounded forward in the mountainous sea, though the waves crossed each other and imparted shocks and counter shocks. Okay, shocks and counter shocks, which would have crushed a craft less solidly built. Okay, a craft which is the boat that is sailing. Okay, that is built less solidly. From time to time, the coast was visible through the broken mist. But two vessels was inside. Tankadere was alone upon the sea. There were some signs of a calm at noon, and these became more distinct as the sun descended towards the horizon. The tempest had Hi Blackpink in your area 0. Okay, thank you for joining the live this morning. So right now we are doing a reading session of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Okay, do remember to tune in to our live later on in the afternoon for vocabulary practice together, okay? Okay, moving on. The night was comparatively quiet. Some of the sails were again hoisted, and the speed of the boat was very good. The next morning, at dawn, they espied the coast, and John Bunsby was able to assert that they were not 100 miles from Shanghai. 100 miles, and only one day to traverse them. That very evening, Mr. Fogg was due at Shanghai if he did not wish to miss the steamer to Yokohama. Had there been no storm, during which several hours were lost, they would be at this moment within 30 miles of their destination. The wind grew decidedly calmer, and happily the sea fell with it. All sails were now hoisted, and at noon the Tankadere was within 45 miles of Shanghai. There remained yet 6 hours in which to accomplish that distance. All on board feared that it could not be done, and every one, Phileas Fogg, no doubt, excepted, felt his heart beat with impatience. The boat must keep up an average of 9 miles an hour, and the wind was becoming calmer every moment. It was a capricious breeze, coming from the coast, and after it passed the sea became smooth. Still, the Tankadere was light, and her fine sails caught the fickle zephyrs so well that, with the aid of the currents, John Bunsby found himself at 6 o'clock, no more than 10 miles from the mouth of Shanghai River. Shanghai itself is situated at least 12 miles up the stream, At 7, they were still 3 miles away from Shanghai, so the pilot swore an angry oath. The reward of £200 was evidently on the point of escaping him. He looked at Mr. Fogg. Mr. Fogg was perfectly tranquil, and yet his whole fortune was at this moment at stake. At this moment, also a long black funnel, crowned with wreaths of smoke, appeared in the edge of the waters. It was the American steamer leaving for Yokohama at the appointed time. "Confound her!" cried John Bunsby, pushing back the rudder with a desperate jerk. "Signal her," said Phileas Fogg quietly. A small brass cannon stood in the forward deck of the Tankadere for making signals in the fogs. It was loaded to the muzzle, but just as the pilot was about to apply a red-hot coal to the touch-hole, Mr. Fogg said, "Hoist your flag." The flag was run up at half-mast, and this being the signal of distress, it was hoped that the American steamer, perceiving it, would change her course a little, so as to succor the pilot boat. "Fire," said Mr. Fogg, and the booming of the little cannon sounded in the air. Okay, this is chapter 22. Oops. Chapter 22. Okay, now we are at chapter 22. Okay, let's finish this chapter up before we end off today's live at 1:30 p.m. Okay, thank you all for still listening in for this storybook reading session with us, and do remember to follow us if you haven't for our daily life English lessons. Okay, moving on. Next part. Okay, what is going to happen? The Carnatic, setting sail from Hong Kong at 6:30 on the 7th of November, directed her course at full steam towards Japan. She carried a large cargo and well-filled cabin of passengers. 2 staterooms in the rear were, however, unoccupied, those which had been engaged by Phileas Fogg. The next day, a passenger with half-stupefied eye, staggering gait, and disordered hair was seen to emerge from the second cabin and to totter to a seat on the deck. It was Passepartout, and what happened to him was as follows. Shortly after Fix left the opium den, 2 waiters had lifted the unconscious Passepartout and had carried him to the bed reserved for the smokers. 3 hours later, pursued even in his dreams by a fixed idea, the poor fellow awoke and struggled against the stupefying influence of the narcotic. The thought of a duty unfulfilled shook off his torpor, and he hurried from the abode of drunkenness. Staggering and holding himself up by keeping against the walls, falling down and creeping up again, and irresistibly impelled by a kind of instinct, he kept crying out, "The Carnatic! The Carnatic!" The steamer lay puffing alongside the quay. On the point of starting, Passepartout had but a few steps to go, and rushing upon the plank, he crossed it and fell unconscious on the deck. Just as the Carnatic was moving off, several sailors who were evidently accustomed to this sort of scene carried the poor Frenchman down into the second cabin, and Passepartout did not wake until they were 150 miles away from China. Thus he found himself the next morning on the deck of the Carnatic, and eagerly inhaling an exhilarating sea breeze, the pure air sobered him. He began to collect his sense, which he found a difficult task, but at last he recalled the events of the evening before, Fix's revelation, and the opium house. "It is evident," said he to himself, "that I have been abnormally drunk. What will Mr. Fogg say? At least I have not missed the steamer, which is the most important thing." Then, as Fix occurred to him, "As for that rascal, I hope we are well rid of him." As that he has not dared, he proposed to follow us on board the Carnatic. The detective on the track of Mr. Fogg, accused of robbing the Bank of England. Sure, Mr. Fogg is no more a robber than I am a murderer. Should he divulge Fix's real errand to his master? Would it do to tell the part the detective was playing? Okay, so he's just contemplating. Okay, would it not be better to wait until Mr. Fogg reached London again, and then impart to him that an agent of the Metropolitan Police had been following him round the world, and have a good laugh over it? No doubt, at least, it was worth considering. The first thing to do was to find Mr. Fogg and apologize for his singular behavior. Passepartout got up and proceeded, as well as he could with the rolling of the steamer, to the after deck. He saw no one who resembled either his master or Oda. Good, muttered he. Oda has not got up yet, and Mr. Fogg has probably found some partners at whist. He descended to the saloon. Mr. Fogg was not there. Passepartout had only, however, to ask the pursuer the number of his master's stateroom. The purser, the purser replied that he did not know any passenger by the name of Fogg. I beg your pardon, said Passepartout persistently. He is a tall gentleman, quiet and not very talkative, and has with him a young lady. There is no young lady on board, interpreted the purser. Here is the list of passengers, you may see for yourself. The idea struck him that he is on the Carnatic. He felt thunderstruck on the sea. He saw it all now. Remembered the time sailing had been changed. He should not have informed his master of that fact, and that he had not done so. It was his fault. But then Mr. Fogg and Alda had missed the steamer. Yes, but it was still more the fault of the traitor who, in order to separate him from his master and detain the latter at Hong Kong. Okay, the latter means his master. Okay, so when there's him and his master, right? The latter it refers to the one behind. Let's say that if there is bread and butter, okay, the latter would mean the one that is last said. Okay, you mean butter. Okay, so that is what the letter means. Okay, don't be confused. This is just a short explanation of it. Okay, so let's move on. He now saw the detective's trick, and at this moment Mr. Fogg was certainly ruined. His bet was lost, and he himself perhaps arrested and imprisoned. At this thought, Passepartout tore his hair. Ah, if Fix ever came within his reach, what a settling of accounts that would be. After his first depression, Passepartout became calmer and began to study his situation. It was certainly not an enviable one. He found himself on the way to Japan. And what should he do when he got there? His pocket was empty. He had not a solitary shilling, not so much as a penny. His passage had fortunately been paid for in advance, and he had 5 or 6 days in which to decide upon his future course. He fell to at meals with an appetite, and ate for Mr. Fogg, Alda, and himself. He helped himself as generously as if Japan was a desert, where nothing to eat was to be looked for. So at dawn on the 13th, the Carnatic entered the port of Yokohama. This is an important port of call in the Pacific, where all the mail steamers and those carrying travelers between North America, China, Japan, and the Oriental Islands put in. It is situated in the Bay of Yedo, and at but a short distance from that second capital of Japanese Empire, and the residence of the Tycoon, the evil emperor, before the Mikado, the spiritual emperor, absorbed his office in his own. The Carnatic anchored at the quay near the custom house. in the midst of a crowd of ships bearing the flags of all nations. Passepartout went timidly ashore on this so curious territory of the sons of the sun. He had nothing better to do than taking chance for his guide, to wander aimlessly through the streets of Yokohama. He found himself at first in a thoroughly European quarter, the houses having low fronts and being adorned with verandas, beneath which he caught glimpses of neat peristyles. This quarter occupied with its streets, squares, docks, and warehouses all the space between the promontory of the treaty and the river. Here, as at Hong Kong and Calcutta, were mixed crowds of all races, Americans and English, Chinamen and Dutchmen, mostly merchants ready to buy or sell anything. The Frenchman felt himself as much alone among them as if he had dropped down in the midst of Hottentots. He had at least one source to call on, the French and English consuls at Yokohama, for assistance, but he shrank from telling the story of his adventures, intimately connected, as if it was that of his master, and before doing so, he determined to exhaust all other means of aid. As chance did not favor him in the European quarter, he penetrated that inhabited by the native Japanese, determined, if necessary, to push on to Yedo. The Japanese quarter of Yokohama is called Benten, after the goddess of the sea, who is worshipped on the islands round about. There Passepartout beheld beautiful fir and cedar groves, sacred gates of singular architecture, bridges half hid in the midst of bamboos and reeds, temples shaded by immense cedar trees, holy retreats where were sheltered Buddhist priests and secretaries of Confucius, and interminable streets where a perfect harvest of rose-tinted and red-cheeked children, who looked as if they had been cut out of Japanese screens, and who were playing in the midst of short-legged poodles and yellowish cats, might have been gathered. The streets were crowded with people. Priests were passing in processions, beating their dreary tambourines. Police and custom house officers with pointed hats encrusted with lac and carrying two sabres hung to their waists. Soldiers clad in blue cotton with white stripes and bearing guns. The Mikado's guards, enveloped in silver in sorry, enveloped in silken doubles, hauberks, and coats of mail, and numbers of military folk of all ranks, for the military profession is as much respected in Japan as it is despised in China. This means hated. Okay, despised, hated. Okay, despise means hated. Okay, so you can say I despise him means I hate that person. Okay. Went hither and thither in groups and pairs. Passepartout saw, too, begging friars, long-robed pilgrims, and simple civilians with their rods and jet-black hair, big heads, long busts, slender legs, short stature, and complexions, varying from copper color to a dead white, but never yellow, like the Chinese, from whom the Japanese widely differ. He did not fail to observe the curious equipages, carriages and palanquins, barrows supplied with sails, and litters made of bamboo, nor the women nor the women whom he thought not especially handsome, who took little steps with their little feet, whereon they wore canvas shoes, straw sandals, and clogs of wood, and who displayed tight-looking eyes, flat chests, teeth fashionably blackened, and gowns crossed with silken scarves, tied in an enormous knot behind an ornament which the modern Parisian ladies seem to have borrowed from the dames of Japan. Passepartout wandered for several hours in the midst of this motley crowd, looking in at the windows of the rich and curious shops, the jewelry establishment glittering with quaint Japanese ornaments, the restaurants decked with streamers and banners, the tea houses where the odorous beverage was being drunk with sake, a liquor concocted from the fermentation of rice, and the comfortable smoking houses where they were puffing not opium, which is almost unknown in Japan, but a very fine, stringy tobacco. He went on till he found himself in the fields. In the midst of vast rice plantations, there he saw dazzling camellias expanding themselves, with flowers which were giving forth their last colours and perfumes, not on bushes but on trees, and within bamboo enclosures cherry, plum, and apple trees, which the Japanese cultivate rather for their blossoms than their fruit, and which queerly fashioned grinning scarecrows protected from the sparrows, pigeons, ravens, and other voracious birds. On the branches of the cedars were perched large eagles. Amid the foliage of the weeping willows were herons, solemnly standing on one leg, and on every other hand were crows, ducks, hawks, wild birds, and a multitude of cranes. All these are sorry, all these are breeds. Here, all these are breeds of birds. Key different breeds of birds. They have a symbolism in Japan. Okay, moving on. Next, good, said he. I'll have some supper. But on smelling them, he found that they were odorless. No chance then, thought he. The worthy fellow had certainly taken good care to eat a hearty breakfast as possible before leaving the Carnatic. But as he had been walking about all day, the demands of hunger were becoming importunate. He observed that the butcher's stalls contained neither mutton, goat, nor pork. And knowing also that it is sacrilege to kill cattle, which are preserved solely for farming. Cattle is cow. He made up his mind that meat was far from plentiful in Yokohama, nor was he mistaken, and in default of butcher meat, he could have wished for a quarter of wild boar or deer, a partridge, or some quails, or some game or fish, which with rice the Japanese eat almost exclusively. He only exclusively. They just eat rice. But he found it necessary to keep up a stout heart and to postpone the meal he craved till the following morning. Night came, and Passepartout re-entered the native quarter, where he wandered through the streets lit by vari-coloured lanterns, looking on at the dancers who were executing skillful steps and boundings, and the astrologers who stood in the open air with their telescopes. Then he came to the harbour, which was lit up by the resin torches of the fishermen, who were fishing from their boats. The streets at last became quiet, and the patrol, the officers of which in their splendid costumes and surrounded by their suites, Passepartout thought seemed like ambassadors, succeeded the bustling crowd. Each time a company passed, Passepartout chuckled and said to himself, "Good, another Japanese embassy departed for Europe." Chapter 23. Okay, so today we'll be stopping our reading session over here at chapter 23. So it's in which Passepartout's nose becomes outrageously long. What does this have defined? I think this is a reference to lying. Okay, this is my guess where he starts spouting lies. As you know of the story Pinocchio, and when you tell lies means that your nose will go long, right? So that is maybe what they are referring to. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you all for joining our live today. Okay, thank you so much for listening in and your comments and liking the live. Okay, I hope to see you soon in the next live. Bye, Kira. Okay, I'll be having a next live. Hope you go and eat your lunch, eat fully, and we can go through vocabulary together. Okay, bye bye. Thank you for listening.